and welcome to the launch of the Woman in short docu-series being led by the United Nations in Belize. I am your host, Zaina Kristen Wade. Thank you for joining us today. 2021 is a time to reflect on progress made, to call for change, and to celebrate acts of courage and determination by ordinary women who have played an extraordinary role in the history of their countries and communities. The world has made unprecedented advances, but no country has achieved gender equality. Yes, women stand at the front lines of the COVID 19 crisis as healthcare workers, caregivers, innovators, community organizers, and as some of the most exemplary and effective national leaders in combating the pandemic. The crisis has also highlighted both the centrality of their contributions and the disproportionate burdens that women carry, such as legal restrictions, keeping 2.7 billion women from accessing the same choice of jobs as men, or the fact that less than 25% of parliamentarians are women, or the harsh reality that around the world, 1 in 3 women has or will experience gender based violence. This is why the United Nations in Belize has ventured to do a docu-series titled Women In, bringing women who share different experiences, perspectives, and skills to the table, and those who make irreplaceable contributions to decisions, policies, and laws that work better for all, especially towards gender equality. Today, we're not only launching the Woman in short docu-series, but particularly the Woman in Spotlight Initiative episode. This highlights women who are at the forefront of eliminating violence against women and girls. If you didn't know, the Spotlight Initiative is a program responding to all forms of violence against women and girls globally and is a joint partnership with the European Union and the United Nations. In Belize, the Spotlight Initiative seeks to contribute to ending family violence by strengthening policy and legislations, building the capacity of state and non-state actors, expanding the range of services available, and addressing social norms and behaviors. We will have a short roundtable with a few women who are being highlighted throughout our Women in Spotlight Initiative video. This will be led by Perla Hinosa, the Spotlight Initiative Communications Officer in the Office of the UN Resident Coordinator for Belize. So welcome, Perla.
Thank you, Zaina. It is certainly a pleasure and honor to be with the women doing amazing work to advance gender equality. Joining me today are Ms. Cynthia Williams, the Executive Director for the National Women's Commission. She coordinates Belize's efforts dealing with gender issues nationally, working closely with government, civil society, and the private sector groups. She also leads the coordination of the national response to gender-based violence and multi-sectoral efforts to implementing both the National Gender Policy and the National Gender-Based Violence Action Plan. Hi, Ms. Cynthia.
Thank you, and good morning for having me today.
Also here is Michelle Irving, the coordinator for the Productive Organization for Women in Action, better known as POWA. Through her leadership, the group has grown into a very vibrant peer-to-peer education women's group, reaching far into communities and working to transform the lives of women and their families.
Everyone, thanks very much for having me.
Lastly, we have Consuelo Godfrey, the Teacher Training Program Director for Pathlight Belize, where she leads workshops and conferences and works in partnership with the Ministry of Education in helping Belizean schools achieve the goals of their school improvement plans.
I thank you, Perla and Zaina, for that great introduction. I'm happy to be here and I'm happy to get the discussions going. Thank you.
Well, welcome, ladies, and thank you for joining us today. It is an honor to listen to your stories and perspectives, and I can't wait to learn more about the work each of you do day in and day out. So let's begin. Handing over to you, Perla.
I wanted to start the conversation by asking you ladies why it is important for us to protect women and girls in Belize.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Perla. I think for me, the most important reason why we should protect women and girls in Belize and around the world is because it's their human rights, plain and simple. I think when we look at the issue of violence against women and girls and any other type of violation, it is against their human rights. And we find that it has both short-term, it has short-term, immediate, and long-term effects at all levels in their lives, whether it's physical, sexual, and mental, and I think it definitely affects them. And overall, it affects the families, the communities, and the country. So we need to ensure that that protection provides them with the space to really reach who they're supposed to be in order for the country to be able to reach the benefits of their developments and their contributions. For me, that is, I think, the most important reason for it.
I certainly agree with Cynthia by saying that it's our obligation and it's Belize's state obligation to protect women and girls as they are 50% of the population. That's a huge number. And so apart from being human rights, because sometimes, maybe people, it's very abstract to think about, what our human rights and how it's manifested and all of that. But I would just like to say that the issue of violence affects us. It reduces women and girls' productivity. It reduces their ability to function in the workplace, in schools, in the society, because it causes trauma. And trauma, if we could think about maybe people who have gone to war and they have seen horrible things. And so sometimes we say, oh, that person is shell-shocked. That's a community term that we use or a local term that we use. But there are many women and girls that are walking around with trauma. And so that affects their mental health. It affects their ability to make decisions. It affects their ability to live a productive life. So it affects their entire being. And I think it's of maximum importance that one, we come to the place of understanding that we must respect all citizens and give them the best possible life. And it's no different for women and girls. And sometimes, as far as I am concerned, I dare to say it is more so important for us to protect women and girls, especially they are the ones who will continue to have children. They will be raising other children. And if they're traumatized emotionally, physically, financially, sexually, then they will pass on a lot of these issues to the children that they're raising. And so we create then a huge cycle of violence, of crime, of an uneasy environment. And so it is important to, one, give maximum protection to women and girls and to ensure that our entire society is safe.
Thank you so much for that response. And we go over to know Ms. Godfrey.
Thank you, Perla. I also ditto what Cynthia and Michelle has said. We know that in the world globally, 1 in every 3 females have experienced some type of or some form of violence, physical violence against her personhood in this world. We know that women in Belize go through a lot of violent experiences. The reality of women in Belize is that a lot of women fear walking on the street. They fear entering into relationships with male counterparts because they have had history of violence in their families or they've had history of violence within their society. And Belize, being a developing country, is no different. In fact, women make up 50.7% of Belize's population. We're over the 50% mark, and males are just a little shy of 49%. So women do make up most of the population in Belize. And I would also want to say that young women, we're talking about women from as early as 12 all the way up to mid-adulthood, which is like around 35. That is a very vulnerable age for women, especially for young girls who have had violence in their home, especially for girls who have seen violence in their schools, who have seen their mothers and their aunts and sisters be victims of violence. They sometimes end up into that generational cycle of violence. And I think it's so important that we educate our women in Belize, especially at a very young age, because I think social, and I guess we'll talk more about educating our men, but women socially aren't necessarily educated or socialized into this idea of protecting themselves. And so I applaud the efforts of UNICEF, I applaud those efforts of organizations like the Women's Commission, like POWA, like Win Belize, that have tried to, for many years, advocated for women's rights, but particularly for young girls and the violence that's been inflicted against them. If, as a society, we don't do it together, it cannot work. It has to be community effort. It has to be an effort where we start to educate our young women from very early on that they don't have to remain in relationships that are violent. They don't have to say yes when they're beaten. They don't have to remain in those situations. There is help. And so I am happy that I'm a part of this roundtable to be able to listen and offer suggestions. And myself, being someone that has been a victim of violence myself as a young child, as a girl growing up, I know what it's like to have experienced something like that. So I know that you can come out of it, and I'm so happy that more is being done legislatively to protect women, and more is being done on the ground with communities protecting women. So thank you.
Thank you so much for all those great responses. All of you bring such great experience and such a great background. And thank you, Ms. Godfrey, for also sharing your own personal experience. Very heartfelt.
So, ladies, actually, thank you so much for everything that you've said. I just wanted to touch on points that, each of you were really explaining. Particularly for me, I actually went out this weekend just on a little family holiday, and I passed a sign that said, if women aren't safe, we're not all safe. And that was really striking to me. Having women protected and, women at the forefront of everything. The question Perla asked was, why is it important for us to protect women and girls in Belize? Well, as you guys rightly mentioned, they are in essence the leaders, the mothers, the frontline persons for the next generation. And Miss Consuela, you shared a lot in terms of the violence that you went through, and you do not need to accept yes. So I just wanted to hear more stories from, you guys, and really, why is it so important for us to understand that women are in all these different sectors, aspects, without, having them at the forefront? Are we really safe? So let's just have a conversation on that.
I saw that sign, and it got me thinking as well. And so I think what we have to start to discuss is that we have to stop discussing this issue of violence against women in silo. Mm-hmm. And so we need to make the conversation broader. I think that when I was listening to Ms. Consuelo and listening to Ms. Cynthia and hearing them what they're saying and in their particular area, but I think far too often this issue is deemed as our woman's issue. Mm-hmm. This in this corner we're discussing that. It's an economic issue. It's a political issue. It's an issue of development. And so we need to move it. We have to push a little harder, a little, and go a little further to ensure that it is seen. It is the prerogatives of the ministers in cabinet. It is the prerogative of the ministers in churches. It is the prerogative of all community leaders, right down to the person who is cleaning the yard at the school, right down to the person who is in the neighborhoods. And we have to ensure that maybe we should have that sign on each block. The other day, somebody the other day we had a violent situation in our neighborhood. And my daughter was like, there is a confrontation next door, and there is an issue, and the neighbor was saying, that will not happen in our street. And so she came and called the police because we will not allow it. And so it was good to see how people start to become very cognizant that even though it's behind closed doors, so to speak, it is all of our concerns. And if we do not then push it further into us understanding that it's all of our concerns, and violence, dominance, and not only physical violence, we have to remember, we have to also think about emotional violence, psychological violence, the deprivation of one's rights or the withholding of one's rights. Even by state agencies, there's a lot of agencies that do not understand what people's rights are. And so we have to broaden this conversation.
And even as you explained, in many areas and walks of life, there are persons who are going through violence. It does not have one particular face. And when I saw that sign, in my mind, I saw newborns all the way to elderly persons. They don't have a particular face, but each one of them might be going through some violence, and we might never know. It might be something that we're not seeing the signs, and I think in general public, it's also good for everyone to know what some signs might be, things that you don't particularly pick up on from a day in day out aspect. But if you learn small little telltale signs of a person who might be needing help, that you can provide that support, whether it be emotionally or helping them get the services that they need. Um, and even so, we have police officers, persons who are at the top of their field, ministers, CEOs, who are also going through this. It's not to say you are weak and that you don't have an education, or all the little things that some persons in society might nitpick and say, oh, these persons might be a little weaker than others, that's why they're being picked on. In that sense, it's not that. It's just a situation. So I would definitely want to hear from you, Ms. Cynthia, from the National Women's Commission's side. What are your thoughts on this?
But I definitely agree with what Michelle said. And I think I want to be able to maybe take it a bit further than that, because definitely the reason why a lot of the work, has not advanced as you would like to or would hope to is because a lot of times it's left only to a certain group of people to take the lead and to take charge. And the responsibility really falls on every single person in the country, around the world. And I know, and one of the things that Michelle also mentioned, which is very true, because that's just how our society comes in. And the reason why it is like that, because we have been socialized to think of women and men in specific aspects, in specific areas. And whenever any of them kind of fall out of those aspects or those areas, then it's not seen as them following the norms, because we are dictated through our society the way we're raised, that we have to pursue and we have to follow certain norms. And often, we have to also go beyond the fact that we need to protect women and girls just because they're their mothers, they're our sisters, or their daughters. We have to go beyond and say they have to be protected no matter what, because of their own humanity, as what Michelle said. And I definitely agree with you in terms of how do we engage those who are the decision makers. And part of the reason also that is affected is because women are not there. Most of the decisions, when we look at our own situation, most of the decision makers are men. And so our spaces, our realities are not really embedded in the processes that require change. Michelle talked about institutions that also systematically violate women when we talk about the lack of response or the insufficient response by duty bearers as well, whenever these persons are in need and a support. And our own individual biases that we have, especially against persons who, for whatever reason, they choose to go back, or they feel they have no more options to go back, where we are in our judgments forcing them to go back, because whenever they go back and they come back to us, oh, well, you know what? I'm not going to meddle with it because you keep going back. It's a private issue. It's no longer a private issue. It was never a private issue. It was a way of how it was controlled, so that people are not leaving those spaces. It is all about power and control. And that, again, is another area of, when we talk about patriarchy and we talk about misogyny, it is the place that we have given women and continue to give women, that they're not efficient enough. They are too emotional to do certain things. And the fact of the matter, when we talk about emotions are simply part of being human beings.
Yes.
I wanted to bring in Miss Consuelo, who had shared her own experience and who leads in a lot of education training programs. If you maybe at a younger age were taught certain things and taught certain social behavioral changes and changes in norms, how would you think you would have changed in any way in your situation where you face violence?
Thanks, Perla. That's a great question. I'm going to pivot off of what Michelle said earlier. She said that we work in silos, and that's not just true of issues related to gender-based violence, or in our case, violence against women, we do work too much in silos. We have many organizations in Belize that are doing pretty good work. We have the United Nations and Spotlight that's doing pretty good work, but then we're not working in unison. And we're not approaching the situation in a multifaceted approach where we start from the rearing and the socialization of young women, young girls at an early age, to understand what value they bring and their worth. I think a lot of times as a young woman growing up, I didn't feel I was worthy to not be beaten. I didn't feel that I was worthy to not to fight for myself. It was not until I was about 17 years old that I was able to fight back in when I had that person beating me and punching me up. It was not until I was old enough to understand that what he was doing to me wasn't right. And so I had to fight back, and I physically fought him back. And that's when it kind of subdued some of the violence against what was happening to me in my home was subdued because I was fighting back. But I didn't learn to fight back until I was exposed and I was able to read on what was happening in the world and educate myself to some extent. And even back then in the 1990s, we only had organizations like Women Against Violence, WAV, that we know it to be back then, that were fighting for women's causes. We have come a very long way in Belize to offer information and awareness building, but I just feel like we're at this point in time, we need to dig deeper than just having organizations working on the ground. We need to get into the homes. We need to educate women who have generationally been violated. Grandmothers, then daughters, and then granddaughters. That is what happened to my family. My grandmother was a victim of abuse. My mother was a victim of abuse. I was a victim of abuse. But it stopped at my door. So my girls that I have two daughters, a 20-year-old and a 12-year-old. My 12-year-old's birthday is today. And I am so grateful. Yes, I'm so grateful that she didn't grow up in a home where she saw violence being inflicted on women from a man or from other women. And it's not just awareness building of being a survivor in the home and knowing your worth and knowing your value as a woman, but women need to also be educated and supported, that we need to support one another. Women don't support women the way we should. We support women in these great, wonderful global causes, but we have to also support women. When we see a fellow woman in our organization being promoted, let's support her. When we see her in a relationship that is toxic and violent, we get together as friends and we take her out.
Yes.
Those are the kinds of things that we need to start doing on the ground if we're going to make some take out the root causes of violence. And I don't think that we do that enough as women in this country. And I think we need to look at ourselves internally and ask ourselves, have I supported a fellow sister today authentically, genuinely? Supported her? Did I give her the type of support she needed? Did I just listen? Or was I just ready to jump on advising her to get out of a relationship I know absolutely nothing about? So it's those kinds of multifaceted support I think we need to start looking at beyond just policy making and legislation and getting into leadership. It's so much more than that.
I want to jump in here because Ms. Consuelo, I think that when we really start to peel back violence, I don't think we always just go to this small segment of violence that is related to maybe intimate partner violence or violence in the home. But we have a very violent society that women face violence in the workplace. You know, we have to start move away from physical violence, and we have to start to understand how the deprivation of rights, the minimization of your value. You spoke to something very good. The minimization of your value, not giving you the what you're worth, always trying to take away what you're worth. It's very sinister. And so a lot of times women who have experienced violence now become violators themselves, and they violate other women in many different ways. And so sometimes, even when we talk about women in leadership or women in certain spaces, that they're supposed to be guardian of this issue, they themselves are not cognizant of how they are in return perpetrating some of the same violence because they have not been able to ventilate this issue and to ensure that these issues, and many times they are ashamed and they're afraid because they think that in their position, if they start to ventilate this issue as talking about it or seeking, even they don't have to come on a show like this and talk about it, but seek the necessary help. Know that this is what has happened to you and what could be some of the effects of that. And so then you can be supportive, like you say. You can understand that when another woman is having her menstrual pain, what that means, how that affects her ability to work, what it means when somebody have miscarried a child, what the grieving process is, especially if they were looking forward to that, not to minimize or reduce them just to a robot in terms of their work or what they're doing. Really see them as a human being. And so I think that this issue is very complex. And we ourselves, as we go out and talk to other women and talk to girls and really be brave and strong and say, I will support my sister. I will walk with her. I will walk through the fire with her if I have to. I mean, many times, we quiver because we figure to ourselves, how will we be seen? How will that affect us? Will I lose my job? Will I lose my friends? Will I lose, my status in the society? And so these are all the things we start to think about. And so this issue it goes beyond just talking about maybe in a relationship. And I just want to make this one quick point here. And when we talk about relationship, we have to also see that we have issues of violence, not just men perpetrating on women, but in same-sex relationship, we have these issues of women being very violent to their partners in terms of, in a same-sex relationship, and men as well. But here we're talking about women and their capacity to perpetrate violence and how it is manifested in different ways. So we have to take the conversation beyond. And so when we talk to women, really and truly give them the armor that they need and the support they need. And I'm happy to actually, hear Miss Consuelo speak and for us to, I know Miss Cynthia very well, so we speak often, but for us to continue to create this network, and this is a job of Spotlight. We have, through the Spotlight program, be able to broaden our network and to meet each other from around the country. And this is how we'll be able to create sustainability, because then we will always know each other and continue to call on each other for sometimes support, for sometimes support in the work we're doing, or support for ourselves. There's also that issue COVID-19 has brought us. Sometimes, man, we're so tired, not even coffee to work no more. It's just, it's just that you are so emotionally stressed because of the issues that you are seeing and the issues that you have to deal with personally and the issues that those that you're supporting have to deal with. So it's very, very important.
I like to piggyback on what Michelle, because Michelle really had also, and of course, thank you, Miss Consuelo, for sharing and being open in your story. I think, like you, many other women, it has to come to a point where they're ready to do that. But I'm also thankful for that, for allowing us to share in that space. One of the things that I've been trying, or as working in this field, Michelle has been in it far longer than I. But one of the things that I've been thinking about and trying to analyze and trying to further understand, because even for us who've been in the efforts for this length of time, we still have a lot to learn. We're still understanding, because it's very complex, like what Michelle said, but it's also ever changing. There are multiple factors that were there before but are not there now, but new factors are coming in. Like Michelle said, in context of LGBT couples, I recently had a discussion that they said, what is it different when you talk about violence against in intimate partners, in heterosexual relationships and LGBT relationships. And both of us came to the conclusion at the end of the day, it's about relationships. It's about the power and the control one exerts over the other, and the things that they do to ensure that they retain that power and control. And for me, believing it more and more, because even within heterosexual relationships, often you see the binary, or in terms of even those relationships where one takes the persona of being a more male oriented and one female oriented. So it's all we need to do is constantly be trying to understand the multiple systems at play. And one of the things that I've learned are looking at it from a different lens, or from a lens of power and a systematic power and control, is utilizing the concept of divide and conquer. And when you look at it, it has also been applied to women. And that kind of gives me a better understanding of why is it that we ourselves keep doing what we do to each other, in terms of the lack of support, in terms of the putting down, in terms of not being able to be happy about someone being advancing, and we're not the ones advancing. And it's because of that same concept of power and control, and that has really been applied to us as well from very early on. When you look at our historical aspect of it, when women were such satchels, and they were basically handed over from father to husband, and they were not allowed to intermix with one another, to socialize one another. Even when they were socializing, there always had to be these chaperones and guidance in terms of even the things that they were allowed to discuss. The fact that they were married and they were not even aware of what it is to have sex, what happens when you have sex. So that principle, I think, is kind of helping me to really understand and move beyond. And whenever I meet anyone who I feel is perpetuating those type of stereotypes and principles, that it's coming from a woman against another woman, not for me to then judge that woman, because at the end of the day, we all have been part of that system where we have been taught psychologically, emotionally, and mentally that we need to be the ones who step ahead. We don't have time to kind of look behind and bring others along with us. And that has been, I think, our greatest error, or our greatest weakness, because we have been apply that concept of divide and conquer. And if we need to start moving beyond that, you're going to see the efforts of it.
Thank you so much. I must admit that all your responses were amazing, and sharing your own personal experiences, from sharing your experience in the field, from seeing your experience throughout your life, and touching on that, and touching on the multi-dimensional effects that gender inequality has on women, and more so gender-based violence. Thank you for touching on all those points, and just making it more of a conversation, and having this open space where we can share. I would want to know, sorry Zain, I don't know if you want to move forward. I would now want to move forward to launching this video, which unfortunately is shorter than the amazing responses you just gave us, and the amazing insight that you have, but it really highlights the work that you're doing on the ground with the Spotlight Initiative. And I want to thank you all who are part of this video, and the other members of civil society organizations and leaders who came and were part of this video as well, highlighting the importance of this work and why we do it. So thank you all, and I hope you enjoy.
Thank you.
Violence against women and girls is one of the most widespread, persistent, and devastating human rights violations in our world today. affecting 1 in every 3 women worldwide. In Belize, women 25 years and older are most affected by domestic violence, which occurs in all areas of the country. While 65% of children experience some form of violent discipline, and 75% of all cases of sexual violence were among girls 10 to 19 years old. The Spotlight Initiative is responding to all forms of violence against women and girls globally and is a joint partnership with the European Union and the United Nations. In this Spotlight video, we'll hear from the women behind leading and carrying the work of this initiative are key in creating change, especially in eliminating violence against women and girls.
When anyone tries to live or perform within another role in another capacity, that's where often we see violence. And power and control is retained through violence, is retained through patriarchal societies, which Belize is one of them. And I think that definitely impacts and is the underlying cause of gender-based violence in Belize and in many other countries as well. The work that the National Women's Commission does is really looking at how do we ensure people understand what impact gender socialization has on our children, on our women, and boys and men, on our society in general. Our work is to really advance gender equality, equity, and women's empowerment. And so the Commission really looks at bringing partners from both government and civil society, from faith-based organizations to come together in a multi-sectoral approach to look at what exactly do we need to do. We need to ensure that services and programs are provided for persons who live in violence, but at the same time also work in changing those attitudes and norms that impact and influence violence to keep on living within our society. And the Commission is looking at ways how to advance it in ways that allows people to recognize it themselves and to see what role each and every citizen within each of these different institutions can play in advancing and changing these norms.
When it comes to the Spotlight Initiative, the Human Rights Commission of Belize, we're grateful for this partnership because what it allows us is, well, in this situation, it allowed us to go mobile and reach out to a wider population. And also the focus is on women and children, and we realize that in these populations, both populations, but in this migrant population, a lot of these violations are against women and children in these populations. A lot of these immigrants, they don't have access to legal advice. They are vulnerable to a lot of human rights violation, and they don't have the resources, the financial resources to access legal advice. And so we realize that this is an opportunity for us to reach out to these people and provide these services to this population.
We are also looking at the evaluation of the current National Gender Policy and the National Gender-Based Violence Action Plan to look at what has been implemented over the course of the years. As you know, the gender policy has been in effect since 2013, and when we look at the action plan, it was from 2017 to 2030. So it's an opportunity to reflect and look at the advancement, what are the challenges, what are the barriers, and how do we move forward to ensure that any revised document then speaks of the reality of Belize and is very realistic to the needs and the challenges that people experience in the community.
While the National Women's Commission coordinates the national response and are strengthening legal reform, there are civil society organizations and advocates who are ensuring that women and girls, especially in hard-to-reach communities, are getting essential services and information. One of them is the Productive Organization for Women in Action, better known as POWER. The Spotlight Initiative partners with organizations and women's movements like POWER to ensure that no one is left behind by providing essential services to women and girls who need them the most.
So when the Spotlight Initiative came on board, we have been involved from the start. And currently, I sit on the reference group, the Civil Society Reference Group, to amplify the issues, especially as it relates to women and girls, and also then to look at engaging men and boys in addressing the issue of gender inequity. We realize that your race may play a role, where you live, your urban setting, your rural setting, if you're a man, you're a woman. So gender come clearly into focus for me, and I do the work that I do because I do believe in gender justice and that women and men are equal and deserve to be valued as such. And then that led into us looking into other issues such as gender-based violence and how that affects a person's self-esteem, how that affects limiting their ability to reach their full potential, who they are, and to enjoy their full rights as human beings. And so these are some of the things that propelled me. There's also the issue of justice, of being able to go to court, to be able to get your protection order if that's what you need, to access whatever legal rights you have, and to ensure that you are respected.
For us at CDF, when we started out in 2008, we decided our focus would be around the protection of rights of women and children. But the Spotlight Initiative presented a unique opportunity for us as a civil society organization to really impact persons on the ground level. The aim of Spotlight is to give more visibility to civil society organizations and to use some of the best practices that have been developed at the community level to develop projects and activities that will enhance the protection of women and children at the community level.
Through the Spotlight Initiative, we were able to provide over 1,400 services to vulnerable women and young people in all parts of Belize. And so we're very happy to have been able to reach persons in this very vulnerable period where we're afraid to go to the public health systems, and so bringing the services to them in their communities. We also had a particular training focused on young people on comprehensive sexuality education, and so we spent about 5 weeks meeting virtually and face-to-face with young people from all across the country, and Spotlight was able to support us in doing that, in not just helping us to live our mandate, but to help all the persons that we've interacted with that have access services. And we've seen where persons are in some areas reaching out for more services.
As family violence also includes violence against children, the Spotlight Initiative focuses on helping at-risk groups, many of whom are female advocates and youth out of school who often have limited access to services or opportunities for development. Pathlight Belize is an organization that empowers children in the country to receive a quality education.
Pathlight's mission is to provide support and allow children to reach their God-given potential. Now, what does that mean? It means then we tap into each and every child that we work with. We work with over 100 children. That has given me many opportunities to work with students from all ages, specifically more with high school, and allowing me to see what they see and what they go through. Many of our students at Pathlight experience a lot of challenges in the home. In our case, we have teachers who are victims themselves of abuse. And through our child abuse mandatory training that we're doing with teachers, our teachers have said to us time and time again, if they hadn't had that training, they would not know what to do when it comes to those cases that appear in school with them.
The work continues. The mandate for us is always that children should be given first priority, and their top priority in everything that we do, because we also work closely, or have adopted in the work that we do, the Convention on the Rights of the Child, being that the child and his or her entire well-being is of utmost importance.
My office here is not to build new things or to establish new things. It's to strengthen what's already in place, to build alliances, to create partnerships with the NGOs, with the governmental agencies, to be able to make sure that the services, the resources that are limited and are available can be used effectively to benefit our families, our children, and those in need.
To me, it's important for us to support each other and to understand what is happening in our community, that different people have different needs.
We're at a turning point through programs like Spotlight program.
This initiative, as it is so named, brings focused attention to these issues, moving them into the spotlight and placing them at the center of efforts in order to achieve gender equality and equity. We all have the responsibility to speak up and act against all forms of violence.
Wow, what an amazing
Yeah,
video.
that was, yeah.
it really comes at a critical moment, especially with the recent spikes of domestic and sexual violence in Belize. And I really wanted to ask, from your organizations and your experience, how can women and girls ask for support? Where can they go? Who can they talk to? And in the same aspect, how can men and boys get involved too? Because it is essential to include everyone. So I wanted to ask the panel that.
Well, here at Pathlight, thanks, Perla. Here at Pathlight Belize, we have an actual system in place for the students that we serve. We serve about 188 high school students across different high schools in Belmopan and the Belize City area. And for us, we have a support group for our girls here. We also engage them in programs, entrepreneurship, engineering, STEM for girls are all some of the initiatives that we have had, breakthrough programs that have worked really well with allowing our young girls here at Pathlight to feel they can contribute, they are important, their opinion matters, they can learn, they don't necessarily have to depend on someone to do that for them. For our boys, what we've done is we have created a boys program here that will kind of support some of the socialization that has happened in the home, support in the sense of how can men be supportive of women? How can women be supportive of men? We know that, and with the clubs and the youth groups that we have here at Pathlight, we mix them up together because we want them to learn to work together. We want them to understand that as men and women, they can contribute equally, equitably to the development and success of what we need to call a great Belize. So here at Pathlight, we do offer those support programs to both boys and girls. We are taking a little bit more progressive step in offering hotline support for our girls at Pathlight. But we also know that the girls, they also need to understand that if they're experiencing situation at home that they feel they can't get out of, we have a system in place, a referral system that we've worked through NOPCAN and NCFC that will be able to assist the girls, getting them the help they need, providing that support to them, not just financially, but also emotionally and psychologically. Because like what Miss Michelle said, violence can come in so many forms, and physical violence can breed a lot of other consequences and causes that can make the particular victim feel less than. And we don't want our girls here at Pathlight or anywhere feel less than, or our boys, because it's equally important that we educate and socialize our men to be men, but also to be men in support of what women do. And so that's kind of where we're heading with Pathlight.
Sure, I definitely want to commend you with those programs there, Ms. Consuelo. And I think for us at Power, our focus is women and girls, for sure. We started because women realized that they needed to support each other in terms of being HIV positive, in terms of being victims of different forms of violence, including childhood violence, domestic violence, intimate partner violence. And so our impetus was to get together, learn, and as we learn, share. That was the idea. And so, it has evolved to include several other dimensions, as you would imagine. And we have always looked at what we do as a family approach, because when we first started, women got together, but our partners would be there, who would be men, our sons would be there for whatever reason. Sometimes we needed help in whatever we were doing. The entire family has to be involved. Someone will be bringing a bucket of juice, someone will be bringing some sandwiches, someone will be pushing something or building something based on what we were doing. So we have always embraced the idea of having men and boys around, but we started to work particularly with young boys who were basically the children of our power women, because we started to realize that what we did, we didn't do it together. We worked with the girls, like maybe in the morning, depending on what was going on, and we worked with the boys in the afternoon, because We wanted to ensure that the girls were empowered enough to be able to stand up for themselves or not always default their reality to men, because sometimes you start to notice, I mean, it was in some situations where men were involved, they would dominate the conversation. Women would not be able to rebut or to stand up for themselves because of the socialization and the level of violence and the level of power and control issues that they have already come with set in their heads. And so after a while, we started to realize that, they have come a long way. And then we started to work like through Spotlight, we started to work with couples in terms of looking at healthy relationship. And we target both couples from the LGBT community and couples that were heterosexuals. And so both men and women then would come, hear the same thing, learn the same things, talk about rights, talk about violence, talk about marital rape, talk about the Constitution, talk about those things, talk about self-esteem. And those things are important. And we begin to see then, even partners who would have been around the women part of power for a long time, said, wow, this is what you guys learned. This is what the workshop is, because they were always just basically on the periphery. And now when they were included, they themselves became peer educators. And there's this one partner who is working along with where a lot of men are working. And he said, babe, I tell them, man, I tell them you have to respect women and you have to, and this is what rights are and this is what this is. And starting to look at themselves differently, starting to gain information, and then starting to definitely see what healthy relationship, what equal value is. He says, well, whenever he comes home early, he makes sure he makes tea because, babe, me, I do the work, and, not just waiting for what the traditional role would have been. And also to look at men as mentors, for men to pull up other men to say, hey, because what do men do when they hear that the friend that they hang out with or drink with beat the lady or treat the children bad or are sexually abusing or having a relation with an underage girl? What do they do? Are they able to tell the partner, boy, I don't hang out with you because that's not right. You shouldn't be doing things like that. And if I'm with you, birds of a feather, like what my mom used to tell me, or some things like that. What do they say? And so when we talk to the mentors in their particular area that they're focusing, we realize that there is a great potential for men to be able then to support other men in bringing equity and equality and to dispel the issue of this dominance and this issue of this control and this issue of power and this issue of how they see power relations in terms as it's us against them kind of a situation. And it's that we're all in this together. And so then the issue of compromise become very important. The issue of listening become very important. The issue of communication, the issue of trust. And all of those things are breaking down gender socialization in terms of what boys were told, because it affects both boys and girls, what boys were told about not being emotional, about not crying, about not showing, that side of you, that very human side of you, because you have to carry around this tough exterior when inside you're quivering and you're breaking down. And so you also need support. And so those are some of the things that we have been able to go beyond just our nose, so to speak, as it relates to working towards the gender justice. And Spotlight has given us the opportunity to be very creative, very flexible. I would say Spotlight and COVID, because we had to be very creative, very flexible, very methodical in terms of reaching our targets, reaching our programs and getting a positive outcome.
I think one of the things that the National Women's Commission really tries to share with persons that we work with is that because the issue of gender-based violence and just gender inequality on a whole is so vast, there's always a space for people to get involved. Even for the women who are seeking support, while we know that as a system we struggle, and many might even say that the system is broken, we still have services available for them. And we're trying to see how we can bring together everybody to work collaboratively and to be able to recognize the different niche that they can find themselves in, and ensuring that we fix that broken system. Because the system is broken because it's comprised of us. It's comprised of each and every one of us. And some of the things that Michelle mentioned just now in terms of communication, trust, we're not born knowing these things. We learn. And often because of the way that we've been socialized, we don't learn that. Even we get in relationships, we have our children, we don't learn it. We kind of learning as we go along, and often we make so many mistakes. But it's in the recognition that what are the needs and what are the things that we need to do that we can advance the things that we need to do and ensure that we provide those spaces for those women. I think it's important. I think, often it is said that men have not been engaged, and the truth is they have been engaged in the past. Maybe not as much as it should, but we are trying to, and I'm really happy to see that, the efforts that Power makes, the efforts of Spotlight makes in terms of the engagement for boys and men. Because imagine if every single organization makes these tiny and little steps in engaging both men and women in their areas. We have a lot of organizations. I think one of the mapping activities that was done by UNFPA, and it was not as comprehensive as we would have wanted, it yielded at least 76 civil societies around Belize, the entire country. And we know we have much more than that. So imagine if we all are able to do little steps like that, engagement of boys and girls within their own areas, how much more work can be advanced. And that's where I think it's important for us to come together to know what we all do. It is not about whether one is doing more than the other, but rather how do we do it together and contribute to whatever Power is doing. What can the National Women's Commission does to support what Power does, and the same with Spotlight. As Ms. Godfrey was talking, in my mind, there are so many ideas because there are several efforts where Spotlight can become involved in terms of the work with men and boys. And so for us, I think while we do that, we are slowly changing the perspective and the attitudes of people that work within the system that hopefully then will begin to mend that. And so we do have in the districts, for example, Michelle works with the Women and Family Support Services. And, while we are constrained, because at the end of the day, it's only one officer for the entire district, one of the things that the National Women's Commission is supporting the work is establishing the gender advocates in several communities around the country that can provide support to officers that work within the various ministries, because often the work is needed right there at the community level. But the person who's responsible for that district might be engaged in another area of the district. So having these gender advocates, I think, is important because it at least will provide the response right there then in the community. So while we're starting small, our goal is to be able to have multiple advocates around the country, around the rural communities especially. And also I see the importance of us holding people accountable in ensuring that these entities do what they're supposed to be doing when we're talking about health, when we're talking about police, because we're not asking them to do their job as a favor. They are being provided, they're paid financially, and it's their duty bearers. And if that doesn't happen and we need to address it at another level, then we need to do it. And so we need to be able to do it together. If we do it individually and isolated, our voice will not be as strong as if we come at it together. Imagine if efforts of both Spotlight, Power, and all the other civil societies come together and work and say, this is what is needed, and we will not move until it is needed. How much advancement will we have? And I think that's some of the work that needs to be done in harnessing that power that individual persons need to recognize that they have, and how do we combine it with the power of other people to unite as one? And that is also what we need to do with women, because we don't recognize that power. A lot of women, they don't even see themselves as having an opinion. They don't see themselves as being the drivers of their lives, because for so long they've been told not to. And so I think through those efforts that both Miss Consuelo and Power, to Michelle and all the women from Power, are really important, because then it will build on that esteem, which is so powerful. Even if you don't believe that you can, slowly, whenever we start doing things together, you start to believe in. So listen to your gut, you listen to your instinct. But we can only do that together, and we can only do that in one voice. If we see multiple things and different entities that themselves are kind of working against each other, then what will the women and girls in the communities think? Well, if they can't get together to do or support what I need, then might as well I don't go anywhere. Might as well I stay in what I know. So I think those instances, those things affect the efforts, but I'm really happy. Like I said, I think Power has been doing quite a lot of work in the community. And when I see those women, when I met them 10 years ago to the women that they have become now, I am full with so much pride, because honestly, some of these women are awesome ladies. And they, in the past, maybe they didn't see us having anything, but now they recognize that even then they had. But it's how to help them recognize. So I think we have services to a lot of the civil society. We have some services, and at least legally, as a country, we have a lot of legislations that are good. Some need to be revised and amended, but it's in the enforcement that we also struggle. And I think slowly we can try and do that once people are pushing to ensure that things actually happen.
Thank you so much. It's really great to hear the current work being done and what is left to do. And so I want to really ask now, where can a person go right now in this instance if they are facing violence, if they're facing any form of emotional sexual violence in their home? Where can a person go to now? And then even more so, where can a person go when they want to be advocates themselves in their communities? So just wanted to open that up. What can women do at this point?
Okay, I will take off the power hat for a little bit, and I will speak as it relates to the work of the Women's Department and the Ministry of Human Development. Throughout this country, there is an office that offers protection for women, for children, for young people who may come in conflict with the law, and for maybe several other things that a person might want to talk about, even to offer psychosocial support and referral if needs be. So I would start there, that a person visit the office of the Ministry of Human Development throughout the district, find out where that office is, so that then they can at least talk to somebody, get information. I want to appeal to everyone, women, men, and children, to understand that no one will judge you, or no one will make a decision for you. If it comes to child abuse and that has been proven under law, the action must be taken, okay? Because our children are not able to legally seek action for themselves. But when it comes to women and men, nobody will tell you you have to leave, you have to stay, people will explore with you what your options are. What do you think you want to do? What type of support is available? Because we all understand that is what is needed before you're able to make up your mind. Or, like I always like to say, we just want people to live a life free of violence. You don't have to leave a violent relationship to live a life free of violence. Maybe the relationship will change with intervention, with the necessary support. And so those are some of the things that are available. Don't prejudge what they will tell you, because we shouldn't be doing that. We know that a lot of times duty bearers try to make decisions for people. Every time you come here, why you not left the man, and those kinds of things. No, that's not your place. Your place is to offer the service over and over and over again, until that person maybe come to you one day and say, I am ready to leave now. And then you offer that service again, and the person might go back and they come back. And so that is our responsibility as duty bearers. And so that's one. So there is throughout the country that support that is given for family violence, so to speak. All right. And I want to encourage people to be advocates, to take a friend with you if you need someone to. Sometimes you can't even, you're in such distress, you can't even hear what the information someone is saying, but your friend might pick up. There is also a referral to legal support. So if there is need for legal support, you can reach out to legal aid. There are different attorneys that different officers might work with in a particular district that you could easily make a call, and there are books, there are law, you can search something. And so I think people need to utilize the service, because as duty bearers, that's what the people are there for. And people have to also, on the second hand, be the one to hold those duty bearers accountable. If you feel that you have been violated, if you feel that you have not been treated right, then you could make a complaint. I think Ms. Cynthia could talk about the complaint mechanism a bit more, or go to someone, go to Belmopan, talk to someone, make a complaint, make an official complaint somewhere, somehow. I'm not sure if the Office of the Ombudsman is fulfilled yet, but these places, the Human Rights Commission, get the numbers, call, and so those are some of the things too. There's also additional supplementary support. For example, in the Scientific District at Power, we work throughout the district. We work closely with the community health workers, for example, make referrals. There's a multitude of services that is available through that system, especially now with the support of Spotlight. We have parenting initiative going on, healthy relationship initiatives going on, reaching out in terms of HIV prevention initiative going on. So there's quite a bit of initiative that the women there, like Cynthia says, are doing their thing, and we're so proud of them. And so they're able to make the necessary referral, give the necessary support. And so if persons want to be involved in terms of advocating and coming to the fore, and there's an issue that is coming up right now. I know we're closing, so I'm not going to bring that, but I will be in touch with these ladies separately, and with you, Perla, so to create that network in terms of advocacy and in terms of access to justice as it relates to issue relating to eliminating violence against women and girls and family violence in general. And so because, these things are ever so much evolving, like Cynthia says. So I think that people be proactive. Take control of what is in your society. Take advantage of it. You never know when your human rights training will come in. When it is being violated, you will remember that no, under the Constitution, I have protection, and I will ensure that, that protection is, I will be the one to agitate and to engage, because the courts will not get involved. People will not get involved if you are not the one going there to ask for service. So there is support available. And if you don't get support, because sometimes people act real bad when you go to the office, you do not give up. Do not give up. Go back again. Talk to somebody else. Go back again. Do not give up, because people that are duty bearers are public officers. They are being paid by your taxes. And so make sure that you get the service that you deserve. Thank you.
Thank you to Ms. Michelle.
And Michelle definitely brought in a lot of information, and I think that is the key to the work that is done across Belize. Information is power, and I know it's a cliche, but it's definitely one that never gets old. And that, I think, for us as a national coordinating mechanism, as stakeholders within the process, Power, Spotlight, it is our duty and our role to ensure that this information is disseminated continuously, to ensure that people understand what their rights are and that they have the right to access those rights. It's not only about having rights, it's about accessing rights as well. And like what Michelle said, in terms of holding these duty bearers accountable, using the gender-based violence complaint mechanism that she mentioned. And this system has been developed and is within the National Women's Commission to ensure that that objectivity is provided so that they don't think that, well, you can't really utilize it because the complaint is going to go right back to them and then they're going to destroy it. No, it is housed within the National Women's Commission. The investigation is led to the National Women's Commission, and then we have to liaise with the duty bearers, of course, that are responsible. And should they not take action, then we take it to the level that we need to take it, whether it's at the director level, whether it's at the CO level, whether it's at the ministry level. And so, like Michelle said, take advantage of these spaces, take advantage of these platforms. How do we know that they don't work or they don't work well if people are not using it? And so that's something that we're really trying to promote, ensuring that people understand that there is the gender-based violence referral pathway for frontline persons, because we know that there's a lot of movement within the service. And so sometimes while we may assume that everybody knows what all the services are, sometimes they still don't know. So the gender-based violence referral pathway was developed in partnership with UNFPA as well, and really being able to highlight all the services within each of the districts, and whether it's food, whether it's security, whether it's health. This referral system is one that is given to each frontline person, electronic and hard copy. And it is also accompanied by what they call the gender-based violence constant companion for non-GBV practitioners. And this was developed through Spotlight, which helps people in the communities. We're talking about community leaders to really understand what is the process that people need to go through, what are the different services available, but most importantly, what are the things that they need and should not do? Like, for example, do not judge the person. We should believe the person. We should always ensure we allow the person to practice their right to self-determination. Because like what Michelle said, often people might want to tell them what to do because we feel that they need to come out, but that is not our decision to make. That is theirs, and they will only make it at a specific time. And so for us, we talk and we share the information. When we talk about self-esteem for girls, we do that through roundtables for girls in the different districts. We're actually going to be having one in Corzala hopefully this Saturday, and we're going to have one in San Pedro in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Because we need to be able to bring young girls to the table as well and begin to recognize their voice, recognize their self-worth, and see themselves in different capacities. For us, it's about choice and opportunities. When we talk about equality and equity, it's not being able to afford it, but also recognize what are the different things that hinder them from accessing those opportunities and those choices, whether it's because of disabilities, whether it's because of their age and their faith. We have to make sure that we maneuver ourselves to that. And that's why it's so complex, because it's not cut and dry. We need to ensure that we take all those things in consideration and then be able to then lead the efforts. And so some things work, some things will work. But like Michelle said, it's not about getting tired. It's about not giving up and continuing and exercising things that we believe will work. And always having at the end, as a foundation, the rights and the benefits of those people that we work with. And ensuring that when we develop these things, we also include them in the process, because they know what their realities are and they can tell us what works and what won't work. And that is very important for us at the Commission as well. And being able to partner with initiatives such as Spotlight Initiative, partner with Power, knowing that they're doing work with men, and how can we partner in ensuring that the experience of those men can also add to the experience of men in other areas, because we are such a diverse country. Our values are different and same in certain spaces and clash in others. And so how do we take that into consideration when we implement different efforts? And how do we do that? Through communicating, through sharing of spaces, and always keeping at the end the best interest of those people that we work with.
I think too, it's also important, Perla and Zaida, I think that when we speak of services, we speak about what's available. So I know that there's a global database on violence against women that's brought on from UN Women, and that is available. It's a 0800 A Way Out, or you can WhatsApp to 672-9628 for urgent attention. There is also the Women's Department, 227-7397. That women can contact. And I do know that there is a Child Protection Services Department and section within the Human Services Development Department. And I do know that there's a lot of fear that women, especially victims of violence, fear with approaching certain services and not being able to get the support that they need. But the 0800 A Way Out number, I think, because that's a global initiative and certainly a way for immediate response to occur, that is a support system that women need to have readily available on hand. And teach our young women and our young men that when they see violence occurring within their environment, that there is some support, that there is support. So the message we can give to young girls today and to young women and to women on a whole is there is support. You're not alone. There is a system in place that can support the initiative if you make that first step. And it's actually the first step that is the biggest step in getting that support that you may need. So those are the numbers. There's 0800 A Way Out, or you can WhatsApp 672-9628, or you can call 227-7397, which is the Women's Department.
And as well, Ms. Godfrey, I know that the training program that you offer to teachers, that also teachers have a mandate to be able to report forms of violence, and so that teachers also play a role in this aspect. So it's multi-sectoral, that even teachers play a role. I just wanted to highlight that a bit.
Yes, certainly. And yes, Perla, and we actually just trained over 1,000 teachers this year in child protection services training from high school to primary school. Pathlight Belize, in partnership with Spotlight and NOPCAN, trained 1,183 teachers countrywide in child protection services training. And I can tell you, a lot of teachers weren't aware of a lot of those policies and legislation that govern the fact that they are mandatory reporters. Once your profession brings you into contact with children on a day-to-day basis, you are mandated by law to report cases of child abuse and violence within the classroom or within the home of those children that enter your classroom space. So I know a lot of teachers, we've gotten quite a bit of success reports from that initiative, and NOPCAN is the referral service that we use, and NCFC as well, that we refer those cases to. And teachers let us know that they appreciate the training and that they are happy that they were a part of that, because now they know what to do in this new school year that's coming up. They know what to do when these cases come into their classrooms. So I appreciate Spotlight's support to Pathlight Belize for allowing us to provide that service to teachers.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one little thing there, and this is to go in tandem with the Pathlight training. For teachers who are mandatory reporters. I think that this is just like something that just flashed in my mind. It's a brainstorming moment, because now we have to also see the teachers also as potential victims of family violence or DV, and create a supportive platform or a supportive way that each school could ensure that their teachers who may be experiencing the type of violence, personal violence, intimate partner violence, domestic violence, can be supported to receive help. Because a lot of times as adults, that's where our challenges are, we're still expected to perform our jobs. We're still expected to do certain things. We hide it because we don't want our principal to know. We're afraid of losing our job. We're afraid of losing our children because of the violence that we are enduring. So I also feel that to go along with that, we have to also develop a culture of support for those who may be reporting children who are being abused, but who are also being abused themselves and are hiding it because they don't want that to come to light in terms of how they will be judged, and then creating an environment that is toxic to their own children. So that's just a thought that how we could continue the work to ensure that then women are also, because most teachers are women, are very much protected, or even men who might be going through different issues of separation and custody. I just talked to a man who is a teacher and who is going through a difficult time, that we also need to create an environment of support.
And if you let me, I think one of the things that, we've been talking a lot about the efforts within government as well as civil society, and kind of in a way, the efforts, sometimes faith-based also has a role in there. But I think one of the other areas that we also need to mention that is very important and critical is the work within the private sector. They're the other side of the coin in terms of the employment aspect. And often they also play a role in terms of the support that persons need in coming forward, because like what Michelle mentioned, and it kind of, lighted the bottle that had turned off for a little while, that often because of fear of losing their employment and even going to shelter to make sure they're safe, they often choose not to. And so some of the work that needs to be done with the private sector as well in helping them understand what it is and how does it affect their productivity as well. How does it affect them losing on valuable workforce that, they may have to either leave work because that's what they have to, they are told to do, or their choice is to leave because it's better for them to stay at home to kind of support in decreasing the violence at some point or at times. So we need to also work with them, and through the Gender Equality Seal that was developed last year as well through the Spotlight Initiative, we hope to be doing some of that work. We've identified several businesses who have participated in the past through the work of the ILO within the Chamber of Commerce. And so we hope that they continue to be open enough to ensure that they can see their role in this, and to how they can also provide support to their employees as well, because gender-based violence definitely impacts negatively productivity, and productivity leads to economic of the country as well. And so it's putting everything on the table and looking at how we can kind of touch on each of the sectors and ensure that people really understand their role, like what Michelle had said at one point. It's the work of every single person, whether they think they are in the social sector or not, whether it's religious, whether it's economic, private sector, environment as well. I mean, that's one of the areas that we didn't even touch on, because then even that aspect also have issues relating to women and girls. And so we need to ensure that even that sector understand the work that they need to do. And I'm very happy to see that some of them are beginning to engage us. And I'm sure that Power and maybe even Spotlight to engage them in the development of their own policies when they look at climate change, the role that women and girls play in it as well, and how much negatively impacted they are by some of the decisions that are made at the level where they're not even participating. So, I know this is just a very brief conversation that we're having, but every time we talk about it, it's important to bring the different areas, because often we cannot focus on the violence itself, which is the outcome, which is the consequence. We also have to talk about the prevention aspect and the underlying causes that drive. So in ensuring we bring that understanding of all three levels, then hopefully people begin to see differently, and not just a woman's issue, not just social sector issue, but everybody's issue.
Definitely, and thank you all for highlighting that. And I also want to mention that for support, apart from the hotline numbers that Ms. Godfrey mentioned, that you can also go to a trusted friend, a trusted family member. There's also that support within your reach as well, that could later encourage you and lead to maybe wanting to report or wanting to do something bigger for yourself. So there's also those networks that you could reach out to for support. And I really want to thank you all for your great interventions and how you tied in everything related to gender-based violence, how it's such a huge issue to tackle, but also bringing in your experiences and bringing in your own interventions that you're currently doing and tying it into how this can be eliminated in some way. So I'll pass it over to Zaina. Thank you so much for today.
Yes, thank you, Perla. As well, just ending on a quick note, in one sentence, what would you like every woman and girl listening today to know? So as quick as you can. I know there's so much that you want them to know. but in one small sentence, what would you like every woman and girl listening today to know?
You are valued, you are precious, you are beautiful, you are needed, you are loved.
You're not alone.
You're muted, Miss Cynthia.
Sorry. Don't be afraid to ask what you want and what you need, and learn to raise your voice.
Perla, do you have anything to say?
I think for me, women can achieve whatever they set their minds to. They are strong, they're valuable, and they make the biggest difference in the world. So never give up on your dreams.
Thanks so much. So, just to end it today, thank you, ladies, for joining us, and thank you for our viewers for coming on this journey with us. For more information, of course, you can follow each of our ladies at PAWA, at Patlight, and the National Women's Commission. You can also follow the United Nations Belize social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as on our website, belize.un.org, to learn more specifically about the Spotlight Initiative. We're signing off for today. Have a great week, everyone, and be safe.